Thank you. I'd like to call this meeting of the Prescott Unified School District Governing Board to order. Welcome to all of you who came tonight. Wow, this is great. Nice to see so many. I do know we have a number of people who are here for things.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, our next item is to approve the agenda. Any comments on the agenda? Could I get a motion?
I'll move that we approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the agenda as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Next, we have our minutes from the regular study and voting session of October 4th. Any corrections, additions, anything there?
No. Do we have to do the one from October 28th, or are they just not ready?
They'll be on
The next one.
Yeah. All right.
Motion to approve the minutes from the regular voting and study session meeting of October 4th, 2022 as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes from the regular study and voting session meeting of October 4, 2022 as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. All right, moving on to our presentations. We have a nice large group of people for our presentations tonight. I'm going to call them in from the hall. Yeah, for a presentation, guys, come on in.
Up there? Okay. Front and center.
Coaches. I'd like our two student reps to tell us what sports you're involved
I'm a part of the badminton team, soccer team, football team. I do a club called Back Buddies. I'm a part of the club Green Buddies. A kind of service thing called SALT. That counts, right? And then I know there's a few
well beyond that fourth year math. But what we were able to land on was there was a standard that was an area for us that we wanted to grow that was consistent between algebra, geometry, and algebra 2. So we went, man, that's a powerful way for us to go through and do this. So you'll notice that we are looking to show efficiency, and that is through our Galileo assessment by the end. And it's called quantitative reasoning, use of units to solve. Now, that's wonderful. Our math in general, we went, how can we make this happen in our school? That this whether you're a kindergartner learning math or you're in 12th grade in calculus BC, we're going to be able to show growth in that. So that became a real challenge for us because we discussed how that. Do we go through and make sure that that happens in every class? How does a band classroom improve math skill, you know? And what we landed on was this process. You guys a handout if you want to pass that. This is that mathematical put into words that can be used in every classroom across Prescott High School. It says make sense of problems, persevere in solving them. That to me is curricular. There is no curricular area where that is the only area that it fits. When students are presented with a problem, do make a plan, carry out the plan, this with the idea that a calculus teacher or you're teaching sculpture, you can do problem solving. Each teacher is giving this content scores. So that specific standard that I talked about, we think that this is going to go ahead and help that. So kids can look at it and go, yeah, I know what I'm doing in math class, but it's really interesting that I learned that same procedure across the hallway in history class, or English class, and that allows us to see that growth. At least that's what I hope. And so that's the big piece that I wanted you to see, because that is our overarching school goal. We're measuring growth in that math standard, but we're going to try and do it by involving every aspect of Prescott High School in the classroom. Moving that right along, another big piece here. There's so student support model. Simply, multi-tiered systems of support happens really strong at a K-8 level, but it's never really been represented at a high school level. And so we challenged ourselves to go through and figure out a referral process where we can go through and identify kids who are struggling. System, and then we can respond appropriately. So, for example, with our academic support scenario, every Monday, we're going through and making sure that someone is going to be prepared to be able to meet these kids' needs. We do not want to wait until they're struggling academically to be able to respond. So we are working to go through and do these things before it's too late. I have this too if you want. This one's probably a little less necessary. I'm like passing things out. I'm going to touch on some of the things that fit under the level 1 support as I go through here, but I just wanted you guys to kind of see. Some of our level 1 stuff is as simple as meeting the door, greeting them, seeing how the day's going, having them share some things that are happening in their life, those actions that allow kids to be successful and comfortable in the classroom. Prescott High School, and this is something we continued from last year, is that we have a focus on intervention and enrichment on Fridays. Sometimes people look at that and go, what the heck does that mean? This is academic intervention and enrichment. And we want to see this merge. And I really feel like we've taken the next step with this year. The big focus for us this year is targeted. Getting up and move on to what their subject matter is. We're working on differentiated instruction, meaning that we're hoping to see groups being built within classrooms that allow us to work on different skills or enrichment within that same area. We're doing a lot with cross-curricular connections, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, but trying to connect, that math and science, those things really correspond together, and we've never done that great of a job of connecting the dots on that, so we're working on those pieces. Real-world application, and then student ownership of learning. So you'll see those 3 key points. Personalized objectives, meaning that the kid takes what is the objective for the day and they make it their own. They go through and they go, oh, I know this piece of this information, but I struggle with this. So my goal for today is to really have a better understanding of that portion of this. Success criteria, meaning how do I measure whether I'm doing well? And then student collaboration and choice, because we think there's a lot of value and power in that. Honestly, what we've done is we've created a safe space for teachers to go through and try some different things to make sure kids are grasping and then growing with our content. Yes?
Is it all day Friday or?
Yes, so our 44-minute classes are set aside for this purpose. I really hope that what happens after we've done this for a little bit is that it bleeds back into the whole week. But as of right now, we've tried to create that space to make sure, and we're going to continually do PD with staff to make sure that they are being more creative and using those data-driven opportunities to intervene. That's that. Some other school initiatives, and Connect is something where every staff member is identifying 5 kids that they'd like to set goals for and work with. They may not even be telling those kids. Elle might be on my list, and she may not know why I'm that I want to whatever she's going to head off and do in college or anything. Or it could be that we have a student who's struggling academically. I can't say that would sound ridiculous. But let's say we had a student who's struggling academically. Our teachers might go through and do that. So Badger Connect is a way for us to start picking out those kids that we want to go the extra mile for. The reality is, our staff does it already. But we're just trying to make it, we're putting it down on paper. We're saying these are the kids that we're going out of our way for. And that's every staff member. Badger PAC is the Principal Advisory Council, which is something that I started at the end of last year that I'm really excited about. 2 kids from each grade level are part of my advisory council, and they tell me what's going on at Prescott High School, and we work through ways to make things better. Oddly enough, L's on that as well. OCR, that's on-campus restriction. You guys have probably heard we call it OCR. What it does is it keeps us from putting kids out of school suspension as often as possible. Meaning we're keeping them connected to Prescott High School. They can continue to work. Even though they had some kind of discipline scenario, you'd be shocked how much our out-of-school suspension has gone down because we have this option. We've done a lot with tardies. I think these ladies can tell you what the hallways look like. Tardies were a real big issue, and we're working real hard to get kids in class, in seats, so they can learn. And so we've had a big initiative around that. We've done a ton with school safety improvements. Challenge Coins is a staff-to-staff recognition program that we've been working on, where a staff member recognizes another staff member for something nice that they've done, something that represents who we are at the high school. And we've been trying something new with some of our professional development. We're doing prep period data and CITW professional development. I think it's gone pretty well. It's an opportunity where it allows those teachers to have their afternoons still, and they're just going for their prep period once a month to take part in a professional development opportunity, whether that's our curriculum instruction that works or just data meetings in general. The big thing is not do justice to all of our different teams. This was a big piece that we have at Prescott High School. student support model. A well-being team, which services staff well-being, student well-being, even trying to inform parents. And then we have a technology integration team, which is something new that we're just getting going with. We still have Freshman Academy, but it's something that I think we've taken to the next level. We have moved all Freshman Academy courses to first semester. The idea being that Freshman Academy is what you need to know to be successful at Prescott High School. And it used to happen second semester. We went, I'm not sure why we wait all that time and then have to give them those skills all at the beginning of the year, and it's front-loaded, followed by an exploring elective. So you'll notice the options there: exploring art, exploring computer science, exploring business management, exploring music, exploring challenge, which is outdoor adventure, J-ROTC, this window. And then there is a nice little list of some of the things that we do in Freshman Academy. So everything from presentations from myself going in and talking about what it means to be a Badger to talking about advocacy. Because Fridays in Freshman Academy isn't going to be intervention and enrichment. It's personal one-on-one with that teacher to see how the student's doing. Because again, we want to set them up for success. So that's part of that process. We're always a Badger. I'm super proud of where we are and how much we've grown. I think these core covenant statements have action in our school in reference to our caring, commitment, perseverance, and respect. Do you have any questions for me?
I'm on the second in
Yes.
the Freshman Academy that the students make, so they have that for the whole semester, or is that a sample throughout that?
As of right now, it's just one choice. So what happens is when they're registering at Mile High or where they're coming from, they register for freshman year. They choose what they want their second semester. So the idea is that, let's say a student has a Chartier right now for Freshman Academy, that becomes exploring second semester. And that way they get a little bit of a piece of something that they're interested in. So that's why we have such a wide variety of ways to promote our programs as well. You can go I go, I want to stay on Chartier for art too, and so they can go into that, and I think it helps them with those programs.
All those first are those electives.
Yes, yes. Match up. So meaning you are taking science, you have Miss Green throughout the year. She teaches you freshman academy, you go into computer science when the time comes.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think you shared pretty clear tie-ins to some of the student support, but also initiatives like Connect. I'm curious if you could speak a little bit to safety and just keeping our high school safe and how those systems might support creating physically safe spaces for them.
Absolutely. You know, we've done a lot of work. I'll start real simple, which is that our single point of entry is huge for us. And, our campus, as of 8:15, all the way around, meaning that kids can push out, but they can't come back through in that manner. They have to come into our single point of entry, and that's a huge piece for us from a safety point, because then everybody who makes it in the door has to be buzzed through. If you've visited Prescott High School, you've seen that. Our front reception checks you in, pushes a button, the door opens, and we make our way through. I think that's one of the biggest pieces. I would also tell you that we've done some great things with security. Our security team is the best that I've seen since I've been at the high school. We have some amazing security, very, very active. And my favorite part is all the kids know them. They all know who Mr. Dell is and Michigan. And that to me has created a safe environment where we've created, opportunities to get to know kids, which sometimes it could be that simple to keep a bad situation from escalating, because it's not just some random person walking up on them, it's somebody that they've gotten to know. So that's been a big piece as well around school safety, and we're continuing to try and grow with that. Obviously, we have cameras, we have all of these pieces. We want to do everything in our power to make sure that that is on that next level of great, because we want this to be a safe place. We want to focus on learning, but in order to do that, we have to create safety.
I'm sorry, let me be more specific. Like,
Absolutely.
I see things here like greeting your students at the door, being present always between periods, the Badger Connect, having smaller groups that teachers are connecting with and paying attention to. Have you seen direct examples of that contributing to the safety of the students in PHS?
Well, without question, our hallways are much safer than they've ever been. And a lot of that is just because of situational awareness. People are out, they're aware, they're looking around, they're talking to kids, checking in. I do think those pieces are all a big part, and all of that is one and the same, meaning that, whether we're talking about it from greeting kids at the door or a single point of entry, it all connects to a safe environment where when kids walk on our campus, they know that Prescott High School is somewhere that they want to be.
I assume that if we have other questions of you, they could certainly contact you at the high school.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, anybody feel free. I would be happy to answer anything about what we're working with and what we're doing.
I have one other, if you
Yeah,
have it.
Andy?
So, on the trying to gather math across the curriculum is kind of what I called it.
Yeah.
When I was teaching, it was reading across the curriculum.
Yep.
Do you have any data yet on how that's going with the goals that you've set for that improvement?
I'm a data person, so I don't want to tell you that I have data. I would tell you that I have some indirect examples of kids making the connections. That's where I would see it most, is that the teachers who have introduced some of these things are starting to have I'm also seeing that, across the hall in science, but I'm also seeing it in my that's a big piece, and there's no, they can start to see that. I really think that we'll be able to show growth in that. Obviously, I want to show you hard data when we actually get to it, but I do think this has the potential to make a nice impact.
So with that data, that's going to be on the Galileo assessment, but are we going to tie that to the ACT at some point down the line? Because the ACT is now the state standard for the 11th grade, I believe.
Absolutely, yeah. So my hope is so math's tough because 11th graders take all sorts of different classes depending on where they're at. So that's something to keep in mind. You could be an 11th grader in Algebra 2.
Right.
You could be an 11th grader in pre-calculus. You could be an 11th grader in business. Actually, probably not in business tech. You could be in AP calculus. And so the point is that it depends on that. English 11 is a spot where I think I can see whether we're making ACT, but I know that, which is why it makes a lot of sense that we also have a math goal, because our Galileo is going to connect very well to our ACT scores from the English side of it. I think we can see it in math, but it's hard because there's no 11th grade math course. So that's something we're going to work towards. The other big thing that I want to see is I want to take last year's ACT Aspire, and then I want to see those kids take the ACT as 11th graders, because that will allow us to see, the ACT Aspire gives like an indicator, a expected outcome. If we can show growth from that, well, then we're showing that we're taking the kids from where they are to where they need to be.
That would be really
Or at least in that
interesting.
movement. I shouldn't say where they need to be, but you get what I'm saying, that kind of movement.
That'd be really interesting data to see once it takes place. I know that's a spring semester.
It is, but it's exciting because the ACT has been a lot easier to get kids sold on, in my opinion. They know that that is something that impacts their future. And yes, our whole school takes it, and not every kid ends up going to college, but man, do a lot of our kids, and I think they can take that seriously.
Thank you.
And can you remind us, ACT Aspire is taken by ninth
Freshmen.
graders?
Yes, so I apologize. So ACT Aspire is freshmen, so it's like their introduction to the ACT, and then 11th graders, all of our 11th graders take the ACT test. So it's different, because it used to be the only kids who chose to take the ACT would do that. Our entire cohort of 11th graders gets to take that test.
So is there a midterm Galileo that we can see
There is, yeah.
some data?
They take it 3 times. So we will have one in the middle of the year. So yeah, we could potentially see if that standard is starting to grow from where they began to where we are midway.
Anybody else? Thank you, Evan.
Yeah, thank you guys. Appreciate it.
You might mention to the people in the hall that we're ready to talk about the social studies curriculum.
I would be happy to. Good job. All right, social studies curriculum is up next.
Just to clarify, today we'll be hearing what the committee has chosen. There will be no action by the board on this. This is simply to introduce this subject. So, Kelsey.
Yes. All right, so thank you for being here. I'm glad to be able to talk a little bit about our social studies curriculum adoption with you. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Kelsey Secor, Director of Curriculum for the district, actually Director of Instructional Support. Have to still remember that title. So I am really honored to have members of our Social Studies Committee here with us tonight. And as Ms. Dillon said, we are just here to present the work that the committee has done over the last several months. This is not a voting item at this time. It's really just an informational piece before we actually put this curriculum up for public review later this week. So, we have a pretty extensive committee. This committee is comprised of teachers, principals, district staff, board members, and parents as well. And so we had all grade levels represented, all schools represented as a part of this. And so I'm very proud of the work that they have done. They took this very seriously, and they spent a lot of time making sure we were making the absolute very Our timeline. So we started this process back in August. We knew we wanted to start the beginning of the year, and we have had 5 official meetings. Our timeline did extend, and we did that so that we had some that we have narrowed this down to. So teachers took the time, they planned units, they planned lessons, and they actually did one of our teachers as well. And so I'm going to back up. I forgot to introduce these guys to you. So these are some of our teachers who are here to present today. So we have Whitney Williams, who teaches 4th grade at Abaya Judd, Scott Miller, who's up at Prescott High School, Emily Thomas, who teaches 3rd grade at Lincoln, Lindy Lisbona, who's 7th grade at Mile High, Jessica Keel Phillips, who is 8th grade at Mile High, and Dan Tyler, who's right back here, and he's from Prescott High School as well. So they're going to help explain why these is a good choice for the grade level that they have chosen. I think the important dates to realize down here are really our next steps. So today is our informational presentation to the board before we put it on public review. Our hope is to put it up for public review later this week. We are working with the publisher right now to get digital access for all grade levels, so that is really easy, and anybody can take part in that. And then we are hoping to ask the board to vote on this at our February board meeting. So we will put it up for review for over 60 days. We're extending that time period, and then we'll bring it back to you in February at that board meeting to talk about the review process, to talk about the feedback that we've received from both the committee and from the public and from parents. So we are right in the middle of it. We're looking forward to next steps.
Okay, so to go over the goals that we set as a committee in regards to adopting a social studies curriculum, we came up with 3 major ones. We know that materials have a direct impact on student learning outcomes, and so we wanted to make sure that we were collaborating to find a high-quality, standards-aligned, evidence-based curriculum that will help us to build critical thinkers and communicators who are prepared to meet the demands of college and career and to engage as productive citizens of the world. So that was goal number 1. Goal 2 is to ensure that all students have an equal opportunity to learn by having access to the same content, knowledge, and skills in each social studies classroom. And goal 3, to provide students with content consistency within and between grade levels in order to have a built-in systematic progression of skills and standards that are both vertically and horizontally aligned.
So next is the criteria, and when it comes to how we came up with this criteria, each grade level group, along with board and community members, discussed what is most important to have in a curriculum. These 14 items were agreed upon across grade levels to be the necessary factors in adopting a future social studies curriculum. We rated each curricula on a scale of 1 to 5 in each category. So some of those are: how controversial is it? Arizona standards based, so not just standards aligned. How comprehensive is it? Vertical alignment, how it goes from one grade level to the next. This is actually I'll get back to that, sorry. Flexible pacing guide, balance of online and hands-on materials, addresses inquiry arc, so critical thinking, making sure that our students are understanding the world around them. Cross-curricular, so integrates with elements of ELA, math, and science. Differentiation when it comes to SPED, English language learners, gifted students, different perspectives, and the content. Sustainable, changing technology or programs, is it copy intensive? Includes multiple perspectives on topics. Age-appropriate reading levels and topics. Accurate and relevant resources. Practice with identifying bias and evaluating evidence. And engaging, allows for Kagan and hands-on activities.
All right, so based upon our goals we set forth as a committee and the rubric that we came up with as a group, as a team, we decided to go with TCI across all grade levels K through 12th, which is super exciting to have the same curriculum in every single grade level of a student's progression at PUSD. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and tell you what we came up with in regards to the rubric. So every item here, there's 2 slides we'll go through the aspects of the curriculum that meets the rubric we came up with as a team. So the first way that TCI meets our rubric is it has implemented effectively into districts with no backlash from the community across the board from our research.
It is aligned to the kinder, first, and second grades. It is customizable for 3rd and 4th grade.
Yeah, so after customizing the online versions for 3rd and 4th grade, because Arizona state standards in those grade levels does not align with national standards. So curriculum that is created a grade level for the national standards, we have to adjust with the, with the curriculum provider to create those. So then after that, there's a vertical alignment that reflects the Arizona standards in those grade levels.
The curriculum comes with very flexible pacing guides.
It will only be available online for 3rd and 4th grade, and then it'll be in print and online for kindergarten, 1st and 2nd.
It addresses the critical inquiry arc in the Arizona standards.
And it integrates with ELA standards, which is super exciting.
It's going to provide differentiation for ELL, special ed, and then extension opportunities.
What is the critical inquiry arc?
So if you look in Arizona state standards, you'll see that there's a inquiry arc at the beginning, and it's kind of like this is overview of how you should be teaching these standards in regards to how you approach it with students, like experientially. So then you teach this standard, and it gives you basically a guideline for this is how you help students inquire about that standard. So if you look at the standards there on the Arizona Department of Ed, you can see what I mean by that. This one. If the student journals are given, which is a resource you can purchase, then it is not copy intensive.
3rd and 4th grade will have to make copies from the online portal or use the online platform, but it's going to be customized to our specific grade level needs.
There are multiple perspectives included in the curriculum.
The resources are accurate and relevant.
And the curriculum meets the grade level appropriate need to be able to critically evaluate biases.
The curriculum is going to be engaging. So extensive library of videos and biographies, as well as hands-on and immersive activities.
So the one piece I do want to clarify, just to make sure that we understand this, is with TCI, and this was really with any of the curriculums that we looked at, Arizona has very different standards for 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. And so within TCI, all of that content is there. We just have to work to reorganize it a little bit to make sure that every grade level has the correct standards. We also have the unique situation in 3rd grade where a big portion of their standards are Arizona history. And so that is not in these national companies and their textbooks. So we will supplement with actually resources that we have used for quite some time that have been part of the curriculum that we are using currently. So, and next we have our middle school team up to talk about the implications for 5 through 8 with our curriculum.
Okay, so some of these bullet points are going to be kind of similar just because we're all sort of trying to address those rubric topics. But yeah, just again, the controversial topics, multiple perspectives, looking through the curriculum, what we were able to, just the amount of work we were able to get done with the committee. It's not I didn't see anything in there that was any more controversial than any other high school history, middle school textbook that I've ever really seen. A lot of the topics and things, it's the same kind of stuff. The lessons based on the state standards, there's a really cool link in the teacher portal that you can look through that you can click directly on it and it breaks down like literally the Arizona state standards for 7th and 8th grade. So that was good to see. That vertical alignment, I guess, is the next bullet point. Lessons learned in previous years are built upon. So, for example, in 7th grade, we worked with 2 specific lessons. So we did a couple weeks, probably 3 days each week with this curriculum, just sort of testing it out. And so one of the things we talked about was the scientific revolution, and then that's going to lead into the next chapter. Maybe even this week I might even pull some more stuff from it. I've been really impressed. But so we'll touch a little bit like on the Enlightenment. And then in 8th grade, when they do the more like government civics intensive quarter or first semester that they do, then they go much deeper into that Enlightenment, right? And sort of like how that affected the Revolutionary War and then the writing of the Constitution and some of that stuff. So it does cycle through that way in terms of the vertical alignment. In terms of the order for scaffolding, it's not, you could almost do it in any order. It's sort of like broken down by chapter, by topic. It's really history based, which in 7th grade and is one of we focus more on history and geography in 7th grade. So, but it follows like you would. If you compared 5 history textbooks, the order it's following a chronological timeline for the most part. These last 2 bullet points, especially the second to last one here about the materials can be done online or on paper, it seemed like there was a lot of flexibility in how we use it. So we could have an entire class of students sitting on the Chromebooks and doing it from the computer. If students are absent, it would be really easy to assign them things with Google Classroom. But it's also got plenty of flexibility. A lot of the materials are set up as printable PDF documents, and so I actually didn't in the last couple weeks when I've been playing with it with the students, we didn't do really anything that had the whole class on the computer, which for me that's like a little bit on the computer is fine, but if you start doing that every single day, so there was a lot of room, I thought, for flexibility of instruction and how it was done. Yeah.
So with the activities, they're highly engaging, and so that also builds upon that inquiry arc and critical thinking skills. So it's skills that they're going to apply in a multitude of different areas. So with the activities, it really engages the kids in the material as opposed to the kids just being consumers of the material. So they get to interact with it more, which is, for middle school at least, a very important factor when teaching. Cross-curricular elements, ELA is pretty heavy in our curriculum because of the reading aspect. So with the reading that's in TCI, it is to a pretty high standard, and so it's cross-curricular with the ELA standards, and also with the vocabulary, it integrates well with ELA. With differentiation, it's embedded into it. So with the readings, at least online, there's an A reading and a B reading, and with the A reading, they changed the vocabulary to be more academic for more advanced learners, and then with the B reading, they use more simple terms so they understand the concepts and don't get hung up on some of the more tricky words. With the online format, it makes it really easy for them to make updates in the future as opposed to a textbook where they would have to take that to publication again and again, and that time is very consuming. It's also big on resources to have to reprint a whole textbook and then reorder and that sort of thing. So to be able to get that pushed out electronically, program by program, is helpful. Audio is also available for those reading passages in case the reading is a bit too intensive for certain students or if it's just too rigorous. Reading is factual and relevant, which is really, really important when you were talking about social studies. You can't teach social studies without that factual information, and so the kids aren't getting misinformation. Primary sources are used to practice evaluating evidence and identifying bias. So with using primary sources, this is really, really important as opposed to just secondary sources, because students are able to come to their own conclusions from the original documents as opposed to reading opinions of other people who analyze that document. And then it aligns with district initiatives such as Kagan. If you're not familiar with that, it's cooperative learning. And if you have a middle schooler or have had one, you know that they like to socialize and talk. So being able to do that in a academic manner is one of the best things that you can do for learning. So this is really helpful to assist the learning that way.
Can I ask you one question, quick?
Sure. Yes.
How do you see, as a middle school teacher, how do you see your middle school students engaging with this curriculum? What types of activities do you think you can see?
So I know
happening?
later on we'll do sure, you can.
We're gonna jump ahead.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's okay if it's in there later.
It's okay.
Okay.
This is a good spot. So, so for 7th grade, we did. This is the thing. This is why I'm excited to speak.
Okay.
This is the part. This is the part that has me jumping up and down. Like all those other bullet. I mean, like most of those other bullet points. I mean, you could probably say a lot of these curriculums would check off those boxes, right? But the part you're asking about, the engaging part. Yeah. So we did 2 practice lessons. We did one the first week back on global imperialism, and that one started with the hook activities, right? Mm-hmm. So like just getting them engaged and on the topic before they even really know where we're going with it. So the imperialism activity was, we told them, okay, you're going to get in groups and we're going to redesign the classroom. And then each group was given like 20 sticky notes, and they had to, the different groups were given slightly different instructions. One group was, if they were paying attention, they had more resources, and they were in the form of these markers that they were using to make flags on the sticky notes. And then then the other groups only got 1 marker, same number of sticky notes. They also had to make flags. And then basically what they were told was, okay, once you've got your diagram created, the group with more markers could do this before they had to even create their diagram of the room. They were told, okay, when you're ready, start claiming the furniture in the room for your group. So the students then, when furniture, they had to like loudly declare the name of the country they had come up with, and that they were claiming it in the name of that country, and they could stick their sticky note on the ITV or the Chromebook card or whatever it was. And so as soon as the first group started claiming things, all the other groups kind of started looking around. I mean, it was like in the room. There were kids running everywhere. I had sticky notes on me. They were on the floor. They were on the windows. So it got goofy and silly, right? But what I liked about it was the follow-up was all there. They had a whole T-chart afterwards where there were bullet points about what they did in the activity and how those things aligned with the real history. next day. They got wild, and then we could get into the reading, and we could talk about some of these things, and then we have this reference point for the rest of the lesson. Remember in the activity when you saw people taking notes off, that other people had already put up, or two people were claiming, there were all kinds of opportunities to discuss that afterwards. This one up here was, last week we did one on the scientific revolution, and that also started with a really cool hook activity. We told them, okay, draw a diagram of the solar system. And it's got to include the sun, planets, their orbits, and the moon. And so everybody drew basically the diagram you would imagine. But then when it was over, it was like, okay, we're just going to do a little bit of review. This is probably stuff you learned in 3rd and 4th grade. See, I had this whole PowerPoint presentation where, as a teacher, you basically play it off like it's actually the Earth that sits at the center of the solar system. And as you reveal the bullet points, you're, like, wait, you guys, I guess we're going to have to review the whole thing. And it's really cool to watch students because there are students that are getting upset. What are you talking about? And then you could see some students, in one of the last class periods of the day, it was my favorite moment of the day. This kid looked up and he looked at me, he's like, I see what you're doing. And so we did this whole thing, and then the next day we did some reading with the textbook so we could see what that looked like. And I wasn't sure how that was going to go. It was an entire day of reading and a lot of comprehension questions. But the next day we broke down this. We discussed this picture and what do you see? What do you think's going on? Who's that guy in the middle? And what are they looking through? And what do you think they see? And you could tell after the reading that they had, they'd gotten the reading. We had a great discussion, and then the end of the activity, it was this acted out thing. So this basically Galileo presenting his telescope to this Venetian political group. And so 4 students got to come up and be actors. They had props, and they kind of froze like statues. And then the other groups in the class were reporters, and they had to ask questions to the different characters. And as they asked questions, people would come unfrozen, and they'd speak, and then they'd go back to being frozen. It was a little bit silly, but you could see the questions and how they were answering. So that's why I'm really excited, at least for the middle school, because these were just 2 lessons. It's like, this is the content we're doing, and I just kind of pulled it out, and it was just really well supported, and just watched the kids. They were having fun, they were engaged, you could tell that they were learning from it, and so that's why I'm mostly excited about this, is because it's not just a textbook, and it's just reading and comprehension questions, and that only goes so far. It's like they have, and all these look different, so that's, I could go on and on, but that's what got me excited about it.
Okay. Sounds as if there is greater emphasis on the concepts as opposed to the dates or the names.
It's all there. When you look through the online textbook, I keep saying this, but it's like any other textbook. They got vocabulary at the beginning, and the vocabulary word is highlighted in blue as you're reading through, and it's broken down by section, and yeah, but yeah, in the organization, I guess it's like they provide lesson plans. It's not just, here's the content and here's a bunch of questions you can ask them for a worksheet. It's like, there are like actual activities, and they worked. The supporting material was good. It wasn't silly, and it was like, okay, I get why they're doing this. Yeah, I could go on. I know we don't.
Thank you.
How do I follow that? We're going back to the rubric, right? All right. Yeah, all right. So you've seen this rubric. You've seen what the middle schoolers and the elementary school teachers have had to say about it. High school, we're very, very much aligned with the things that they had to say in terms of controversy. Very little to no controversy in terms of the sources, any biased language within the textbook itself that the teachers were able to identify at the high school level. Again, just like the elementary and middle school standards, TCI has constructed a program that aligns with our state standards and allows for vertical alignment, allows for student growth. So from the elementary skills and content through the middle school, so that the students are prepared when they get to the high school level to dive a little deeper into
the content, the breakdown, how did it happen? Did it happen this way as well? Flexible pacing guide, again, also embedded. There's so much embedded into these lesson plans that have been discussed. The inquiry arcs as well, making sure that, we can actually pull these inquiry arcs into summative assessments, so we can actually have students, build upon their interests as they inquire. Okay, what kind of questions do you have? About this, you've been learning about this content from middle school, from elementary school in some cases. How do we go beyond? How do we draw in your interests? So we really feel that this curriculum allows for that. Again, cross-curricular, we're history, we're social studies. We draw upon so many different courses, from music to literature to art, to mathematical analysis of data, graphing, population growth and things like that, as well as a discussion of scientific knowledge and principles. And you just got a lesson on it, right? You now know that the Earth is the center of the universe, right? There's gonna be a quiz on that tomorrow, right? So, we're good on that front, right? So again, differentiation within the lesson plans themselves. There's opportunities to reach our gifted students, as well as our students who seem to be struggling, who might need a little bit more scaffolding built into it. So lots of various not only activities, but also different forms of content for them. That's sustainable. So a big thing, especially for the high school, is we move to incorporate more and more technology, one-to-one, allowing that both teachers and students will be able to access this curriculum and be able to fill in the blanks as we age, as we pass through time, that we'll be able to pull in more and more materials as well. Multiple perspectives as well, allowing that students are exposed to not only argument but also counter-argument, so that they can evaluate for themselves based on the evidence that have been presented, or to gather additional evidence as well. As they become adults, they're going to be exposed to a lot of information. Again, that critical thinking is very appropriate age-appropriate materials. Again, trying to pull in on high school students' interests, which are varied. Also, their learning needs. The resources are accurate and relevant. Historical events and figures are portrayed, accurately and factually. There's a whole bunch of embedded activities that allow students to draw upon these primary sources. Again, creating arguments for themselves, using this historical evidence to construct their own arguments, to argue based on what they've learned, to take a stand and support that evidence, and be able to think for themselves and be able to share that information. And lastly, there's a whole bunch of supplements out there. There's gamification, so lots of interactive games the students can play, not only solo, but also group activities as well. And then, of course, videos that are going to not only hook student interest in, but also maintain it throughout the course. Because history, there's a lot of stuff to cover, right? All right, and I just covered it in 30 seconds, so I'm out.
So this next piece is if the board does vote on this in February and decides to move forward with TCI, this would be our implementation plan. So I'll let Dan talk through that.
Implementation, we reviewed, I know board members have looked at some of this material as well, and purchasing, if it's approved, would probably go in sometime in February. What that means is we have to get all teachers acclimated to the new curriculum, creating new digs, and that'll take a series of months really to go and do it. Getting training started, we're looking at around probably spring break time, and that again depends upon when we can get materials from publishers. There are paper issues, printing issues, as you guys know, supply chain issues are real. So we hope to get all those things in on time by at least April, so that we can sit down and start digging in. And if not, we do have access to at least the supplemental materials and online stuff that they've given us right now. And by summer, we hope to have some summer committee time to finish up these digs and look at implementation for August. It's not a perfect, nothing ever is when you're implementing something new. Every year you create new digs. I've been doing this a long time, and I'm still creating new curriculum every single year. So that's our first run at it, and we hope to have that first quarter, first semester set by the time we walk in the door in August. Pretty much where we're going
Dan,
with
would
it.
you explain what digs are, please?
What dates?
Digs. What are
digs.
digs?
Oh, like dates. Well, you got January, February. These are district instructional guides. What that means is, for example, Scott is new to our district this year, correct? Yeah. So he walks in the door and we hire him in July sometime, and he says, "Hi, thank you for hiring me. What do we do?" And we say, "You're teaching world history." At some schools, they might say, "You're teaching world history," and then you're on your own. That's not what we want here. We want him to walk in with people that are more experienced that can help him, but also have a spread of, this is our outline for first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter. These are some of the activities we have adopted as we might implement in those quarters, as well as putting him in those teams to be looking at what we have and then moving forward with it. So in other words, we're not just going to say, here's a piece of paper, look it over and ask for questions. We want him diving into it with us. So right now, I have a Google Classroom. I share that Google Classroom with all the world history teachers. I'm co-department chair. I've been teaching it the longest. That's kind of the reason it goes that direction. But myself and 2 other history teachers, they look at what I'm doing and they can say, this is awesome. Or they can say, yeah, you know, not the way I'm going to do things, and they'll tweak it to their own style of teaching. But the resources are there, the digs are there, the standards are all mapped out. Every single Arizona standard, every single skill, and integration of language arts, reading and writing skills. For example, in my class next week, we're writing essays. So we try to use cross-curriculum in all of these digs as well. It's not just history, it's there's a whole bunch of different topics in there.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Questions? Any other questions you have for the for members here?
I have a comment and 2 questions. I'll give it to you all at once. I really appreciated hearing from teachers, not just you, Kelsey, as much as it really helped me put a face and an understanding to that process, both in selecting the curriculum, but what this might look like in practice. And I really want to take your history class. My questions, 1, so the committee, I'm sure there were pros and cons to both of these, so I'd love to hear a little bit about maybe what I don't want to say pitfalls, but some of the challenges in selecting this curriculum were. And then my other question, I know that there's folks that have concerns about curriculum that can change, like living curriculum or supplemental materials that might change. So I'm curious if you can kind of speak to that process and share a little bit about just how that works if TCI wanted to change something in their textbook without reprinting everything.
Awesome. So future-proof really doesn't exist. It's like buying your brand new phone and saying, I'll never need a new one. Mm-hmm. That really doesn't work. So one of the things we looked at with these curriculums is adaptability. With TCI, it is teacher-centric and student-centric, meaning the teachers can adapt the material for the students. With, say, McGraw-Hill, they had a lot of material, but it was all a giant PDF, like 500-page PDF booklet. And it had a lot of great material in there, but if you're going to take pieces of that, you know how challenging that can be. With TCI, the games they put in, the exercises they put in, the videos, the questions, everything like that, you can kind of go through and select, because all textbook companies will say this lesson is good for 80 minutes. Well, we don't have 80 minutes at our school. Or this lesson is 40 minutes. So everything you have to do is adapt to the school situation you're in, the time frames, and honestly, the personnel. The students every year change. Before COVID to post-COVID, we had a different clientele. That's the reality of the world. So you're working with that. We thought TCI was very, very adaptable over McGraw-Hill. The second thing is, TCI, I wish I could show you the textbooks in my hand, but McGraw-Hill is big. It's clumsy. Like carrying that thing around, we said, wow, this is daunting. If I was a 10th grader, 9th grader, 8th grader, and you saw this book, you're like, I'm reading this giant thing. What TCI has done is taken out a lot of, I hate to use the word fluff, but a lot of the accessories out of the textbook and said, this is the same readings. And it really is. Almost every single textbook had the same exact material. But in some of them, like McGraw-Hill, They have all their end of their little section questions and all these things that you don't need in the textbook that you can use online platforms and adopt. So you can save money by using Google Classroom, putting stuff out there. Parents can see those questions and see the material you're using in the class on Google Classroom. And the textbook also, well, all textbooks are online, but we felt that the TCIs was more workable, I guess. The way you can take notes and interactive, I guess is a better word. Hope those answered, I think I answered both questions, but.
Maybe just some of the challenges with TCI.
I didn't really, unless you guys have something, I didn't have challenges with any textbooks except for the reality that I don't use textbooks every day. I use material and textbooks are a resource. So I might use the textbooks once every 2 weeks. None of my students read the entire textbook unless you're in my AP class. To my former students. Then it's a whole different story, but the regular students are going to read selections from it. So I didn't find, I could have went with any of the textbooks, to be honest with you. None of them were like, throw this out. We just felt like that TCI had the best overall platform. I didn't think that any of them were challenging per se.
Yeah, I was going to say, I didn't see any drawbacks to TCI. I mean, we started out with, what, like 6 curriculums?
Yes.
And so Dan's mentioning TCI and McGraw-Hill, that's because those were like kind of the last 2 that we got to. If anything, the drawbacks, what I saw with the other ones were, it's like one methodology or one mode of learning. I'm not using the right pedagogical terms, but like it's a textbook and read. So like how does what's the same? Then the next week when I so you can like the materials, there was nothing. I was like, I don't see anything in there. We still have some questions to get answered about some.
I think one of the challenges will be getting students acclimated to the online platform. But that's an adjustment period and it's so engaging for the students and we can really help differentiate through that as well. So I think it'll be a challenge well spent. And then figuring out 3rd and 4th grade, Emily teaches 3rd, I teach 4th, in regards to how Arizona made it unique for us to teach those standard blocks.
One of the other pieces that we really had to consider, and this does not just talk to TCI, but it is any curriculum now, has a large digital component for teachers and for students. With TCI, it's not as heavy on the student component as it is the teacher component. So that could be a concern if the internet's down or computers aren't working. So that is a challenge. But that is going to be a challenge with any curriculum. The days of the large textbooks and the spiral teacher's editions that you get and you get materials that are this high and stacked for what you teach out here, those are gone. We're not finding that with the majority of curriculums. We did have some of the social studies books that were rather large editions, but that is not what we're seeing for most textbook components.
Other questions? Decide what curricula to look at?
Great question. So we had instructional coaches, we had teachers look and see what was available. When it comes to social studies, there is not a lot of options, which is why we looked at all 6 that we could find. We even had 2 who didn't respond to our requests after, about a month and a half, so we had to move on from them, but they were not the greatest options anyway. So it's a lot of research and a lot of looking at what is out there.
Can I make a couple of very quick observations? First of all, I'm super excited about this. You probably know I taught social studies at the high school for several years. And I was surprised when I first came back to Prescott High School to teach in 2005, I guess it was, taught U.S. government, U.S. history. At the end of the U.S. history book, there's a chapter that said, now that Bill Clinton has been elected, we'll see what happens next. Our current curriculum is 30 years old. So this process is long overdue, and I'm so grateful that we're in the place where we've got some new standards that have been recently introduced. In addition to that, we're in place. So this is super exciting. Great in this curriculum process, not that we've got people observing this and seeing there's good things going on there. This is terrific. Typically, typically the boardroom is relatively empty. We've got Nancy here from the paper. We've got a bunch of district employees, and then Andy Nelson's here. And we love those folks being here, but there's hardly anybody else showing interest. So it's so terrific that we've got, it's not, there's 50,000 voters in PUSD, and there's 15 here in the room. But boy, that's 15 more than we usually have. So I'm super excited about that and enthusiastic. So thank you for being here and seeing there's good things going on here. I really appreciate the efforts that all of you have put in tonight.
So I just want to reiterate next steps. Our goal is that this week we will put curriculum up for public display. And when we get those.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
All right, the next item on our agenda, Kelsey will be coming back to do, and it is a presentation from our instructional support, elementary principals, and elementary instructional coaches.
Hi again. As you can tell, we have been very busy when it comes to curriculum and instruction. Our social studies committee adoption for curriculum is just one piece of that. We also have some exciting things happening with what we call standards-based learning and standards-based grading that's starting in our elementary schools. So we're here to just talk a little bit about that process and the work that is happening.
measure standards-based and so, oh my goodness. In the last teach you a little bit, so you're going to be learners right now, and then sum up a teeny bit about what standards-based learning is all about.
Suppose that today you went back to school and took the normal courses of study, math, reading, science, and social studies. But in addition to those courses, there was also a class called Walk. At the end of the grading period, you earned letter grades for your performance in all those courses, and in the class called Walk, which is a course that teaches and assesses walking, you earned a B. How do you feel about this? Some of you are probably thrilled because before this, the highest grade you ever received in any class was a C. Still, others might think something along the lines of, I haven't tripped or fallen in like 4 years. Shouldn't I have an A? What if you earned a B for walking and every other person you know earned Ds? Do you feel better about your score now? Does this make you think that you're even more skilled at walking? What if they all earned A's? Do you feel worse? At this point in the example, you might start thinking to yourself, what does it even mean to earn a B in walking anyway? And if you're asking yourself that question, you're at a point where you can understand why our school district is moving away from a traditional grading system and toward a standards-based system. To illustrate both the reasoning for this switch as well as potential benefits and outcomes, I'd like to continue with the example of walking class, except instead of imagining you're attending, let's put age-appropriate students into this example. We'll take a few toddlers and enroll them in the School of Walk. Here we have 3 toddlers, Henry, Liv, and Adam. Each toddler is about 9 months old and has parents who are proud to enroll them in the School of Walk, which specializes in teaching toddlers to walk over the course of the next 6 months. Henry is enrolled in Mr. Tuffman's class, Liv is in Miss Masters' class, and Adam is in Mrs. Morepoint's. At the end of the grading period, they're provided with a report card. Henry, who can now not only walk but can run and jump, earned an F for the course. Liv, who can stand while holding on to something and take a few uneasy steps, earned a C, and Adam, who can only scoot like a seal and roll over, earned an A. On the surface, these grades may seem unfair. However, each of these grades can be justified using the same grading system nearly all of us experienced in school ourselves. During the course of study, each student was graded on 1 assignment each month, and those were averaged into a final grade for the course. Each of Henry's assignments were based on the skill of actually walking. Henry, who did not demonstrate a walking ability for quite some time, earned a 0 on the first 3 walking assignments. Maybe he couldn't walk, or maybe he just refused to. However, on the 4th, 5th, and final assignment, Henry earned 100%, as he not only walked, but ran across the room and jumped over some toys in the way. His teacher, Mr. Tuffman, using the same system that's been used for many years, averaged all the assignment grades together, and the math showed that Henry earned an F at 50%. Henry's parents are concerned about his grade because their son can walk, run, and jump, but has been marked as a failure. Liv was lucky to have Miss Masters, a more experienced teacher who knew that toddlers progress in skill related to standing, balancing, and so forth before being able to fully walk. In her class, assignments were not all based on walking, but on the skills leading up to walking, with the final assignments addressing specifically the skill of walking. Like in Mr. Tuffman's class, there was an assignment each month, but instead the difficulty of the assignments increased over time. Liv earned 100% for standing, 100% for balance, and so forth, but earned a 50% on the last 3 assignments. The average of all those grades turned out to be a C. But what does a C mean? Finally, Adam still scoots on his belly, but earned an A with Mrs. Morepoints. Mrs. Morepoints grades the same as Miss Masters, except for one difference. Mrs. Morepoints provides extra credit in the form of extra movement. She believes this is a good idea because even if the toddler is unable to walk, moving around shows that they're trying. Additionally, students don't lose self-esteem by having a low grade. Adam earned low grades on every assignment since the first, but was able to complete extra credit assignments, and with the extra credit added, his grade results in an A. Adam's parents are thrilled that their child earned an A and leave the school happy, unaware their child is developmentally far behind. Within a traditional grading system, the mathematical calculation of each of these grades is generally accepted, which is precisely why a traditional grading system can be severely flawed, and why educational systems around the world are making the shift to standards-based grading. Within a standards-based grading system, students are not graded on their accumulation of points or an average of points from each assignment. Many assignments and activities are meant as practice to help students learn the skill or knowledge they're meant to acquire. In the School of Walk, the toddlers were meant to acquire the skill of walking as defined by a standard. A standard is an agreed-upon level of skill or knowledge that a student is meant to demonstrate by the end of a learning period. Courses of study likely have multiple standards for student performance. A single standard for the School of Walk might read something like, student will be able to walk 10 feet without hesitation or falling. It's a measurable benchmark that can be assessed by any teacher or evaluator. The measure of success on the part of the student would not be rated on an ambiguous A to F scale, but instead as a descriptive scale such as exceeds, proficient, approaching proficiency, and beginning. Additionally, the teachers at the school would evaluate the standard and the proficiency scale to determine specifically what it means for a student to meet each level in relation to the standard. For example, a student who exceeds the standard of walking would walk or run farther than the 10-foot distance. A student who's proficient can walk 10 feet without falling. One who is approaching proficiency can walk fewer than 10 steps without holding on to something for support, while a child who's beginning can't take steps without support. For more information, visit nampa.org.
Thank you. As you can see, yes, there's a little bit of humor there, but it's an excellent representation of kind of the thinking that's changed over the last few years for us. We think our staff, our families, and especially our kids are kind of primed for this change in the thinking. We're teaching from our standards, we're choosing curriculum based on standards. Now we want to report based on those standards and make sure kids understand, oh, here's the expectation, here's how I'm going to get there, and here's what it looks like when I take a report card home. So, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so I will jump in a little bit into kind of some of the work we did yesterday and kind of walk you through some of the same things we did with our teachers in terms of our current report card versus where we would like to head. This is a copy of a current report card. Obviously student information is blocked out there, but if you were looking at this as a parent or as a teacher, we can see, the student struggling in reading, having some issues there is pretty much at grade level on math, an I on writing legibly, but it doesn't really give us a lot of insight on where those specific gaps are. I see that they're struggling maybe with some oral reading fluency, but I don't know as a parent when I see that What does that mean? What does that look like in terms of things that I can practice with them at home, in terms of those next steps, the things that they're working on with their teacher? Are they in need of intervention? Are they receiving intervention? Doesn't really give me the full picture. Versus a standards-based report card would give me the exact standard, and I would see that progression towards mastery. The other part with that S, in the S's we saw in math in the previous slide, which is our satisfactory grade right now for elementary, it doesn't really tell me, it tells me overall that their grade in math is pretty solid, but it doesn't tell me where are those gaps and where are the areas that they've already mastered and that we don't need to practice. If I know my student is really strong in addition, but they're not getting a good math score on their report card, I might still be practicing addition with them even though they don't need it. This gives both teachers and parents kind of a picture of exactly where the student is in what specific standard. So it gives a teacher a plan. It also makes sure that our report cards match what our focus is. Our focus is teaching the standards. That's what we're asked to do as educators, but our report cards don't always match up with our standards. We might give an assignment and then we have to figure out, well, where does this fall within our current report card versus having it actually match what we should be teaching them. So that's basically just kind of and to give some insight, we walked through the process with the teachers. We let them kind of pull out those answers to the differences themselves so that they could really see the importance. I think we got a pretty good response. They're pretty excited to jump in and get going on our change in report cards.
All right, so this is just a picture of the work that's going to take place. So on the surface, it looks easy, a standards-based learning system, right? It's what we should be doing, it's what we're doing. But now, how do we take those steps to make sure that our teachers are prepared for the success that's going to happen? Underneath this iceberg is first priority standards. So that's the work that we took on yesterday. In priority standards, we're really looking for, we had a criteria, we had a checklist that the teachers went through every Arizona State standard. And if you know Arizona State standards, there's a lot of them, and they're on top of each other. So we're trying to figure out what is that process for the priority standards that have endurance over time, have leverage where the kids are feeling like the kids can master it by the end of the school year. There's intervention and enrichment time built in that standard. And how do we get them to be prepared all the way from kinder all the way to the high school level in that standard? Because that is what the standards are. It's a learning progression. So which standards are those priorities? Then the next part of the work that will be taking place after we've identified as a district the priority standards is proficiency scales. You're going to see some examples here in a second, but proficiency scales outline clear learning objectives. It's a learning ladder is really what we're looking at here. So it is going to give teachers, parents, stakeholders, students, everybody a clear picture of what a student knows. It really changes that conversation with parents of what my kid knows and how I can help them. Because I know my kid is at a 2, which is maybe partially proficient in adding. Well, how do I help them to become a 3, which is proficient, which is the skill that's needed at that grade level? And then how do I even extend them, right? That's those kids that need to be extended. How do I get them to be above and beyond that standard? And then the last part, which this is a cycle, so it's not really even a last part, but is the high quality assessments. So these proficiency scales will help us to align high quality assessments to those specific learning targets that are on there. I'm able to then grade as a teacher exactly what they say, exactly what it's not subjective anymore. It's now, okay, yes, you've mastered it by showing me these standards, by these I can statements. It's not like in the video, I'm going to give extra credit, I'm going to give you extra 10 points if you can tell me a funny joke, or, right, that's when I went to school, that's what I'm thinking about, which doesn't necessarily happen anymore, but it does take away that extra credit piece, because we're really looking at skills for students. We're not really looking for just what is an A, I'm giving you an A, I'm giving you a B, right? We're looking for how do we get them to master the skills that are needed. So that's some of the work that will be taking place over the next years. It's not going to be done, and it's going to be continually looked at over and over. Every year we're going to refine and make sure that we're getting better at those proficiency skills. And here is an example.
All right, so teachers are currently doing that work of choosing the priority standards. What's exciting is that next we get to start making these proficiency scales for each of those standards. I wish that I would have had this when I was a teacher in the classroom. It's just a really clear picture that describes how a student is understanding a topic over time. And I wish I would have had that. I'm so excited that we're going to be able to provide this for teachers now. It's also going to help us align our assessments. It's going to help me as a teacher give more effective feedback to my students, to parents. It's going to help me with that support for reteaching, but also for extension for those students that need to look at future learning and take their thinking even deeper. The best part is the next slide where we're giving the proficiency scale to the student in student-friendly language, because that student can now take more ownership of their own learning and be more motivated to move on to those next levels. So that's the work we're doing.
So just to summarize for you, this is really going to change teachers' understanding of each of these standards that they are teaching to a deeper level. They're going to know all the way through what does it look like to be developing, what does it look like to be proficient, what does it look like to have an extension for that standard. That's important work, and that's not something that the state provides us. They just provide us with the standard, so this is work that we have to do. But what's really exciting is the conversation that is going to come out of this work. So if you imagine giving this document to, is this first grade? Yes. First grade, and having a conference with that first grader and say, here's what the expectation is, here's where you're at, here's what we can do to move you to that next level. So what's our plan? What's our plan for this? We can put this in front of a parent and say, this is where they're at, this is how we're going to help them to master this standard so that they're ready for that next grade level, so they're ready for the next topic that comes along. So the conversation is the really exciting piece. The report card, that's the end of this process. That's one piece of it, but there's a lot of work that goes into the beginning part to make that report card happen. So what questions do you have for our elementary team, our committee that has been working on this so far?
Do we plan to have any conversation, training, whatever you want to call it, with parents about a shift in grading and what to expect and how to work within the system in a productive way?
Absolutely, and I'll kind of speak to, so kindergarten currently has a standards-based report card right now that we did 6 or 7 years ago. We couldn't remember our timeline for it, but and it was every year. There's always at that parent-teacher conference. It's always this is what a kindergarten report card looks like. This is how it's different. This is kind of how to expect to read it. And we had kind of a rollout that first year with parents as well, and it's never really been a problem outside of that first year. It was like, well, why isn't my kid a 4? And it's, well, 3 is proficient. That is the goal. 4 is above and beyond an extension and application. So it is a little bit of shift in language. So we'll have some we have some insight on how to best address that with parents, and we'll definitely have some newsletters, videos, things like that. But it really it makes the conversation easier.
Well, and the good news is when we have vertical similarities, the kindergarten teachers get to do all the hard work by educating the parents, and then by first grade, they know it, and then second grade it builds on. So.
And we do have parent-teacher conferences, like Rachel said, before those first report cards go home. So that's a chance for all teachers to have that conversation with parents about what's this going to look like, what's the expectation. But we know that parent training is an important piece. So we will send out with every report card an information sheet on here's how to read these report cards, here's who to contact if you need to ask questions or if you want more information. But hopefully part of that too is those conversations with kids before those report cards even get to parents. Maybe you can start to explain some of this to your parents as well, especially in those older grades. They're capable of doing that. And what a powerful piece where they're taking leadership and ownership of their own learning.
Because I'm sure that other districts have moved to this model, and part of what I heard is that it sounds like we're kind of building this from the ground up. Are there other examples from Arizona that are aligned with Arizona standards that we can rip off of and learn from?
So there are a lot of districts who have already moved to standards-based report cards. So yes, there is a ton of examples out there, and we see them all the time. When we get records requests and we have new students come in, those are part of that record. So we're seeing them a lot where there are examples. We could have just taken one of those and said, this is what we're doing. But again, it's that process of creating those priority proficiency scales that is the important work for teachers, so that they understand that they have ownership in it, and it is really ours. So we will look at what other districts have done, but we really want teachers to experience that entire process.
I just have one comment. It seems, I've looked at standards. I'll just look at math, because that's the only ones I really know. It just seems to be kind of, if you're teaching the standards, that it seems kind of chunky. Like, and there's no melding of that the learning goes whole. Like, I can teach a standard, and they can master this standard.
Correct.
And they can get a 4, but they still can't take that standard and apply it anywhere. So I just don't see, I just don't see how it's gonna help us improve the overall melding for the ACT, our ultimate goal, get those kids into college. But it's just a grading thing, so it's just a comment.
So it actually will address what you just said, as far as helping with that piece. So proficient is here. Not all proficient for standards is that application. Most application is beyond the standard, or it's built into level 3 or 4. So if they are applying it, it's going to be specifically stated in proficient or highly proficient for that standard. So if a student can apply it, they don't just know the concept and can do the one paper or the one problem in isolation. If they can apply it, it's going to be explicitly described here. So a parent will know if they can apply it, a student will know if they can apply it, the teacher knows because they're the one grading and going over this with students.
Yeah, I'm not convinced, but we'll go.
I'm gonna jump in really fast too. If you, especially for math, so I've done a lot of the work for math, I've done a lot of work in math. The powerful part of this is the grade bands that are gonna happen. So it's not just we're doing this in isolation for first grade. We're not doing this just for second grade. We're going to see, okay, this standard in first grade, where does it match and where does it grow the next time in the standard? Most times, what we find, and especially in our math scores, is that we are not hitting some standards because we don't think it's really that important, but really that's the building block to getting them to be mastery in 8th grade. They need to see it in 2nd grade to master it in 8th grade. That's how math works, and so when you're looking at these proficiency scales and you're going through this work, the conversation is really powerful when you start to go grade level to grade level and not just in silos. And so that continuum starts to happen instead of you thinking of that chunking piece.
How much more work does it put on the teacher to keep this information in grade,
It's actually
grade?
less.
It is less?
They're putting less in the grade book. They're not going to put every assignment in the grade book. Now we're looking at feedback. We're giving them that instant feedback right then and there to know where they're at. I might have had a conversation and now I know that you are proficient in this I can statement, and then I'm moving up. It may not be reported. I'm not putting assignment by assignment in the grade book.
So it seems to be more subjective in that manner. Are you going to get parents complaining because they can't see where their grade came from?
So there's an assessment that will be created for each of these standards. So it's not subjective. It is based off of, we know the expectation, let's build those assessments, whether it's in Galileo or whether it's using assessments from the curriculum. But those assessments will be used to determine where they fall on that proficiency scale.
So I am assuming you guys are taking this as best practice. Is there a study that you've referenced or that we can you send me some?
Yeah.
Tons.
The leading person is Robert Marzano, and he's the one who does a lot of this work, and that we've done a lot of research from.
But yeah, we can send you some information. Absolutely.
If we are effectively using a grading system like this, what does the outcome for a class or any given assignment look like? Is it a bell curve? And if so, would we have 50% up here and 50% down here? Is it mostly 4s? Like, what is the?
It is individualized per student. So this is student by student. So each student's going to fall in a different place on that proficiency scale as far as where they're at in that learning progression. So they're going to have very direct feedback on what they need to do to either master that skill or to extend and become highly proficient in that standard. So this will be a process that happens with every single student. Instead of the mass grading that used to happen, it's now very individualized by student.
Is Humboldt doing this?
Yes.
And that's the individualized, personalized learning? Okay.
Can I just speak to when we, as a principal, when we get records and we get new students all the time, and they're from all over the country, sometimes all over the world. And we'll get a records request in, and we get all that data on that kid and all their past history, their report cards, all kinds of stuff. And it's so, you might go, okay, what does this child need now that they're at Lincoln School and they're in 2nd grade? Well, they got a B in reading. That tells me nothing about now what I do, but I would say 8 out of 10 records requests that we get, that other schools fill for us, are standards-based report card. And it's really nice as a principal or a teacher or an interventionist to be able to put that in front of you and go, they didn't just get a B in reading, or maybe they're failing in reading. I don't know what that means, but now these are coming in where we go, I know exactly where their gaps are and what they have not mastered. Makes our life a lot easier to go, now I can steer hopefully that kid doesn't miss a beat. I can steer that kid right into what they need at their grade level. A little practical application there. And like I said, 8 to 10, might be 9 out of 10. Like I said, records coming from other places, anywhere, are standards based at every grade level. In elementary, we're one of the last ones that's going E for excellent, N for needs improved, S for satisfactory, N for needs improvement, I for improving.
We're behind the curve on this.
We are.
A little bit.
What grade levels are we doing this with at this point?
At this point, we've started with K4. So we are going to work from the bottom up. So we started K4. They actually rolled this out on Monday during our half-day professional development on Halloween. They're pretty brave. Karen didn't do it in costume. We tried, but so no Miss Apple Bottom for that. However, we are going to start with 5th through 8th grade math after Christmas. So we're going to start that work with that team. And then next year, we will start with the rest of 5th through 8th grade. Report cards for elementary, we're hoping to have live next fall. So next year, they will use that. For 5 through 8, it will be the following year. We'll have all that work completed, so about a year and a half from now. And then high school, Adam and I have been talking a little bit about this. High school is a little bit challenging as far as what this looks like. So we have 2 years before we are going to tackle that, and we're really going to make sure that it's a solid plan. Because we need to meet the needs of kids who are applying for scholarships, who are applying to college. And also, we want to have this be personalized learning for them. They're at the age where they need to start taking ownership of their own learning. And this is the best way to help them do that. It gives them the platform, it gives them the language, it gives them some very specific direction on what they need and where they need to go.
Would these report cards have any input on personal skills? Plays well with others, runs with scissors, whatever.
Was that the elementary? Because there's some citizenship skills or life skills. We will never stop assessing those.
Yeah, we currently have that. That's on all K4 report cards. That really wouldn't be changing.
But will that also have a standards-based format?
There are some, there are standards that go along with citizenship and that. So this, our goal is to have our Arizona standards covered.
Yeah.
And we have standards for everything. Whether or not we get to the technology ones and things like that on there, we might be looking at 6 pages if we go through every single one, but there are standards that go along with those life skills.
And that is, especially at the elementary level, that is important information of how are kids doing within the classroom environment, within the school environment. Those are really important things that we want to give parents feedback on as well. So we are going to build those in. And that's the piece where we might, because there's not specific state standards that we're going to take verbiage from, that we might look at a lot of those other districts and what they have put and kind of borrow some of their ideas as well.
Elle? I have a question.
Yes.
What does this look like in the realm of like Power School and websites like that? Does that convert over? Do we still use the A and B scale kind of for apps and things, or are we totally switching over to a new system?
So there's a couple different answers to that. So for K4, it is going to look different. They're not going to have the traditional A, B, C, D, F. Because that is just assignment by assignment. That was kind of the example that you saw. That doesn't show mastery or skills that they've acquired. High school is where we're going to have to balance that because you need those letter grades, you need those percentages for scholarships, for college applications, for those pieces. So we have some creative ways where maybe you don't have, you answered questions 1 through 5 on this assignment, but it's instead your assignment is a standard and it's showing that progression of where is your mastery learning along that. Do you have a 1 for that standard or a 2 or a 3 or a 4? Those can help comprise a final grade. And percentage as far as your total mastery on all of those standards for that quarter. So that's some of the direction that we're looking at. But again, that high school piece is the more complicated one.
And sorry to interrupt. Will that look the same on the app, like the actual app for Power School? Like I know my parents enjoy like being able to check and like see my little siblings' grades and my grades. So will that become this in regards to what it looks like on like a parent level?
Yes, and so we're still building what that's going to look like in Power School, so we don't have the exact answer to that yet, but that's definitely information that we're going to bring back to the board is when we have that built and we have examples for you. But there will definitely be information in Power School to share with parents that will communicate that with them. Do you want to, did Humboldt do something similar? Were they able to see grades? They have different platforms.
They have a whole different platform, but you can see grade. You can see there. It lists the standard, and then it tells you. It looks pretty similar to this, but you can dial it down even further into the standards. Is kind of how it's going to be built. But there are there are a lot of colleges that are actually moving this way, and so it's not we're catching up to them as well. So a lot of colleges are also moving this way.
Yeah, great question.
Just one quick question on as far as filling the gaps that students might have. How do you see this helping you, and where would you apply some of that information in that report, I guess?
Sorry. So, well, I'll just speak because I am freshest out of the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
If I had that when I was teaching and my student had that proficiency scale, not only do I know better where they're at because we've looked at and done different assignments that are agreed upon that we can say, okay, you have this skill, but you're missing this one.
Mm-hmm.
You also have some of these. So I know before I'm going to look at these, let's hone that in and get that dialed in with you. So they also know that, which is so much more powerful when my student knows, hey, I'm working on this skill right here. This is my learning target. This is where I'm going next. That's really powerful in the classroom.
And the helpful thing with having proficiency skills K4 is that if I have a student who is a year behind, and maybe that's a grade level I've never taught and I'm unfamiliar with, I can kind of see that progression of, oh, they're really struggling in, second grade here because in first grade they still don't have these skills. So it allows for that fluidness between grades so that it's not just only second grade. I can see the prior learning, I can see the extension, I can see if I have a kiddo who is already here, where am I taking them next so that they're not just sitting in my classroom board.
Okay.
It also allows our interventionists to pull specifically by that learning target. So you have 3 kids, you're going to go with an interventionist and work on that one skill, and then we're going to, that ebb and flow of those pieces there is really helpful for an interventionist.
I think that's the most important thing for me is how can where are we going to make the interventions for those students that are behind now? And we've got lots of kids behind. So.
And it's cool, you're gifted, right? Our gifted and K4 gets to use this in the highly proficient world. Okay,
sure.
You know these 2, right? You're gifted, let's work on the next one. Let's keep going up in that when
Sure.
they get pulled for that too. So you meet all those needs. You meet all the needs of all those kids.
Okay.
Are the assessments going to be digital so they're easy to grade, or are these paper assessments where we have to sit and go, okay, they got the adding part, but they didn't get the you know, where you have to analyze the whole thing and you get a group of people and they all do the same thing and then we average the grades? I mean, is it gonna be more intensive or not? Because that's really hard to do, the grading of those papers.
I think it's the same for now, right? Like, it depends on the standard. It depends on if I can put it into an easy system. Sometimes I like to see the work of a kid, and so I want to do it paper pencil. Sometimes this standard, and they say what they are. They're applying standards, the domain, and then I can determine if it can be online or not. So it's not necessarily, might not be the easiest, but it's what can I see that shows me the skill of the kid.
So it's going to be a variety of things. It could be a 5-question Galileo assessment. It could be an exit ticket from the end of a lesson where you go, okay, I'm looking to see, can they add 2 whole numbers whose sum is less than 20? I can grade that in less than 2 minutes. I can sort out those problems and go, okay, this group has it, this group doesn't. I'm going to continue to work on it with this. These guys are good. I'm going to move on to the next skill with them. So there's a variety of ways that you can assess. But as far as, you know, that let's get together and use a rubric, there's times where that will be, but most of it will not be graded in that manner, no.
Miranda?
So the way that you just like described that last explanation, it seems like this is so specific to one student that is it like dividing the classroom in a way, because some people are moving faster than others, and like how do you kind of still keep everybody together at the same level too?
Is a very intelligent question. So I'm glad you asked that. I don't know if you guys want to explain that. I mean, Roberta, do you want to talk about how you would do this as a teacher?
Yeah, I mean, these are replacing our resources for how we teach in the classroom. So our pacing is already set in those district instructional guides. This just gives me a better resource and the students a better resource to see where they're at. We're still spiraling through those things, revisiting them, coming back to them. It's the same way that I would teach a lesson. Not all the students are going to know where the other one is as we move through. This just gives me and the students a better picture to know where they're at in their learning.
Yeah. So you still have your whole group instruction, which is our Tier 1 instruction, but where we're really going to use this is for Tier 2 and 3, where you're going to pull maybe a small group and give them some extra practice on some skills, or your interventionist can pull, and they're going to give some extra practice on some skills to help them master whatever those skills are within that proficiency.
And I would say at the elementary level, with how much center rotation and small group work we really do, it's a lot easier for us to accomplish this, where I know, okay, I've got 4 kids who are already partway through highly proficient. That's a group I'm working with that is working on something else while I'm meeting with my group who still can't do anything even with some prompting and support. So it looks a little different at our level than it might in those upper grades.
And our upper grades have intervention time built in. They have reteach time built in, whether that's through homeroom at the 5-8 level, or whether that's through, you know, Friday instruction at the high school level. So there is time already there. It's just giving teachers and students better resources to align their instruction.
Anything else? Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Madam President, Deb.
Yeah, I'm hearing voices.
We've had a community member message us on Facebook that they're having a hard time hearing us when they're watching online.
Current events, Superintendent?
I think we should give everyone in the room a college credit towards your teaching degree after those last 2 presentations. These are some real pros, and very impressive to listen to the years of experience of those teachers, and that's kind of how we roll in PUSD. We lean on those experts and say, tell us what we need. And so appreciate the board, and especially with curriculum adoptions. It used to be that an administrator would stand here and say, hey, this is what we think we should do, and we'd adopt it, and everybody would do that, but we're a balanced leadership district, and so very proud of that process and our board and how we do that. I did want to comment on, this is not my Halloween costume. It's not a badger. I lost a friendly bet with the Bears. They beat our football team 2 weeks ago, and I actually forgot to arrange to pick up the jersey. And Mr. Pottis, the superintendent, drove all the way from PV today and made sure I had this tonight. So I want to thank John Pottis for helping me to keep my side of the bet. Now, last year, the same thing happened, but then in the playoffs, they came to Prescott and we beat them. And so he got to wear our jersey a little later in the season. I'm hoping for the repeat on that this year, but we shall see. So Halloween was fun. You know, kids went home half day, and we did a lot of this professional development, some of these things that you're hearing about right now. But we had the famous Lincoln Parade, and here's our Sarah Vincent with her Sylvia. We did not get a picture of the board president leading the parade in her cap and gown, but it was a fabulous day. At the same time, trick or treat or what have you, same day on Halloween, the labels, the A to F labels in Arizona were released, and you'll be seeing those out in the media as of tomorrow. And so, wanted to give you a preview of that tonight. There will be lots said about this as we unpack. Talk about standards base. I mean, what does a B mean to you? And it might mean something totally different to the state board. And so this has been an interesting topic that's been controversial, if you will, in a political way sometimes. Some people say this is divisive to try and narrow a school down to a letter or one syllable piece. But we look at it as a good accountability. Anything that we can pull across as accountability and take a look at compare to others, we will do so. And so not a huge presentation tonight because this just came out, but we'll have a huge presentation in December when we are able to really share with you all the details that go into these high schools, elementary and middle school. At Abaya Judd, we've got a B at Lincoln, a C at Mountain, a B, and Mile High is a C, and Prescott High School is an A. That's a pretty neat piece there. That is not an easy thing to do at a high school, and it may be the first time we've gotten an A within this system that Arizona's rolled out a few years ago. And so you'll be seeing this all over the newspapers. You'll be seeing it all over the media. The cut scores remained the same as before COVID, and that was a little controversial down at the state board because folks were saying, well, there's going to be 300 Ds and Fs in the state, and I think that's kind of how that's rolling out. But we'll take it, and we will tear the data apart and look at it and learn from it and grow. I'll just say this. I'm not happy with the C ever, or never will be. And so you do have to look at it within this system, and we'll take a look at those situations. But we're pretty proud of the hard work that everyone's put into this. We do know that some of our grade configuration has been problematic in the past because, you know, years ago when we right-sized, our community did an awesome job of suggesting how we configure our grades, and we went with a K4, which is one way you can do it, and have a 5.6 and a 7.8. Well, those K4s, actually all the testing lands on your fourth graders. And so with your fifth graders pulled out and put into a different school, that can make kind of a difference there. So we're looking at that. I don't think that our board or our community would make a decision on how to configure a school based on a letter grade, maybe. But those are we'll take.
Remember, though Ashley did, you know, need to be. Also, last week, Hudson and I went and spent an hour and a half with the students and the staff at our PHS at Yavapai College program. It was phenomenal. I really tried. I, talked to the kids and I said, I know you're happy with this, but what could we improve? What could we do better? What could we change? And what I got was blank looks. They are very, very pleased, and I think we should be pleased with that program as well. And there will be an article coming up at some point. Sunday? All right. If there is nothing else, we will move along to our consent agenda. Is there?
The girls may have a...
Oh, yes. Sorry, ladies. You need to speak up when I do that to you.
So we kind of just, for those that are new here, we do kind of an overarching monthly board meeting, kind of give or take what's going on at the high school. So I'll start off here. Recently, for Halloween, we had trunk or treat before Friday's football game in the PHS parking lot. It was a big success. A bunch of schools and kids came out to celebrate. We also had a half day yesterday for staff development, as well as, it was really fun as a kid just being like, oh, half day on Halloween, time to get ready.
So a lot of things have been happening with sports recently. We had a home football game against Lee Williams on Friday, and we won 23-21 off of a kick, which was really exciting. And we've had a lot of the fall sports endings, so people have been going to state. Badminton got second in state. Elle was a part of that. And along with mountain biking getting second in state, and for cross country we have sectionals this Friday. It got moved because there's supposed to be snow on Thursday, which is also kind of ties into the homecoming parade and bonfire this Thursday at 6, which is downtown at Mile High, but the first time it was canceled for weather, and I don't want to say it will be again, but this Friday we have the homecoming football game also, and senior night, which is against Coconino. And then the PHS library is hosting a FAFSA night for seniors and parents, which is tomorrow at 5:30 to just help fill out applications and kind of give guidance to both the parents and the students. We also have Veterans Day off on the 11th, and Thanksgiving break is from the 23rd to 25th.
Now, finally, we have a little bit about what's going on with clubs. So also for Trunk or Treat, we had a bunch of cars represent our different clubs at Prescott High School, which is really, really cool. We have some great clubs. We also had an environmental club clothes swap 2 weeks ago. The rest was all donated to a nonprofit women's shelter. Huge hit. Saw some of the cutest clothes I think I have ever seen in my entire life. It was also for a great cause, by the way. And then NHS is hosting a winter dance, but the dates and details are to be determined. You can ask Mr. Tyler if you have questions. But yeah, that's about it.
Thank you, ladies.
Good job.
All right, now we'll move on to the consent agenda. Any comments or anything before we go to a vote on this? As usual, I checked on the donations. This month we had 15 private donations to the district, totaling close to $5,500 worth of either cash or goods. So thank you to all of those citizens who are providing us with some extras. Could I get a motion on the consent agenda?
I'll move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second. It's been moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. All right. We move on now to the study and voting session. Dan, are you still here? Dan Tyler from the high school has a request.
Back again. Every year we go to a student council convention. If you remember, about 4 years ago we hosted it, first time in 60 years. About a couple hundred schools from around the state come in one place for a 3-day event. It is held here in Prescott, Flagstaff, Sierra Vista, Phoenix, everywhere. This year it's being held in Bullhead City. Like when we held it, there weren't enough hotel rooms just in Prescott, so you use Prescott Valley as well. Well, in Bullhead City, there's way less hotel rooms, even with the brand new Holiday Inn they built. So a lot of the schools are being forced to go across the river over to Laughlin. And so what I'm requesting is that we're allowed to go and stay in Laughlin to go to this convention in January.
Just to clarify on that, in order for a student group to go out of state on a trip, it requires board approval, which is why this is coming to us. So, questions?
There'll be no gambling, right?
No gambling. Not even me, nobody. No.
Anything else? All right, could I get a motion on this, please?
Motion to approve an out-of-state travel request for Mr. Dan Tyler, U.S. and World History teacher at Prescott High School, to take PHS student council members to the 2023 AASC State Convention as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve an out-of-state travel request from Mr. Dan Tyler, U.S. and World History teacher at Prescott High School, to take Prescott High School student council members to the 2023 AASC State Convention as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Have a good time, Dan. All right. The next item on the agenda is an item from the School Facilities Board and various grants we're getting. We have had a request from the public to speak to this. Ms. Michelle Hamer, pardon me.
Hi, my name's Michelle Hamer, and I'm coming to speak on the presentation for the facilities to be repaired and stucco and things like that. I think that's wonderful. One of the things that I just would like to comment on is what I haven't seen, and one of those is the upgrading of our HVAC systems. When we talk about our ESSER funds and how 20% of it's got to be spent on lost learning, one of the things that a lot of schools across the country are doing is upgrading their HVAC systems with new technology that is keeping bacteria, viruses, allergens, and toxins out of our school and out of our kids' lungs. And it's showing that they have a lot less learning because they're in the schools and not at home being ill. So what I would like to see is, I saw, and Brian has a report that we're out of our $8 million of ESSER funds, we're down to 1.5. I would really like to see some of those funds geared towards an HVAC system that keeps our students and our teachers healthy and in school, so we don't have any lost learning because of that. Thank you.
Thank you. For those of you who may not be aware, the board is not allowed to respond to public statements in the board meeting, so. All right. Looking at this particular portion of our agenda, it's asking for approval for these school facilities fund things. Brian, do you have anything you'd like to tell us about these?
It's the normal SFOB process. We're looking at 4 roofs that are outdated. You have to go and get funds for assessment, then design, then procurement, then new roof. And so this is the first of 4 stages, and they have approved, it's about $7,000 per school of the 4 that we're asking. And then also the outside Ruth Street Theater, the stucco repair, because the cement is now exposed and having weather damage. They approved $13,000 to repair that around Ruth Street Theater. So it's about $40,000 that they are approved in these areas, and these are approving the terms and conditions so that they can get going.
Questions?
So they're just assessing the roofs, they haven't agreed to repair them yet?
No, so it goes, they have to be assessed, and so the assessment will show whether or not the roofs need repairing, and specifically around HVACs and what needs to be done in that regard. And then you have to hire an engineer to design, which would be the next step. So if any of the assessments, which I believe all 4 will show every roof on those 4 buildings need to be replaced, then I will go and get a quote for a design from an engineer. I would then have to request those funds. Once they're approved, the term and the condition would come back to the board. Those designs would be done, and then we'd have to go through procurement because it'd be over $100,000, which would be a sealed invitation for bid. We would then find out how much it would cost to replace one of the roofs. We would then bring in other terms and conditions back to you in order to get the roofs going. And so we're probably a year out on any one of these roofs, just because of the process that SFOB has put forward for us.
I just have one curious question. Did we ever get the bleachers?
Yes, they are currently in design. Last April, you did approve the IFB, the invitation for bid for the company to start. They are constructing the bleachers behind the scenes. And so the demolition of current bleachers and then installation of new ones will be right at the end of February, beginning of March.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Not always a real efficient process.
Those are new $400,000 bleachers, though, which is very good because it's not PUSD's money.
If there are no further questions, could I get a motion on this item?
I'll move that we approve the School Facilities Oversight Board terms and conditions for acceptance of monies from the Building Renewal Grant Fund for PUSD school sites as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the School Facilities Oversight Board terms and conditions for acceptance of monies from the Building Renewal Grant Fund for PUSD school sites as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Thank you.
Motion passes. All right, we're up to the information and discussion items. Mr. Moore, how about your school board summary budget report?
As presented.
Thank you very much. Number 2, we have a policy services advisory where this will be our first reading. Marty?
Yep, we just have, it's relatively short compared to the last one. The first one is cleaning up the immunizations that we just passed last meeting. They realized there was some more cleanup that needed to be done. Primarily, they're moving the vaccination requirements to the regulation, which is nice because regulations, as vaccine requirements change, the regulations are easier to change than the policy itself. So that's just makes it a little easier for the future if there are changes to vaccination requirements. And then the other one is essentially putting a contact in policy. If you have a freedom of information request, who is it at the district that you should contact for that? And so we'll add Sarah Torres's name as administrative assistant to the superintendent to respond to those freedom of information requests.
Okay. Community concerns. Anybody have anything to share on that? I would share that I have heard from a number of people regarding the succession plan that we discussed last week. And what I have discovered is that we apparently I apparently was not specific enough that that was a draft, not a final plan. And I would just like to emphasize that, and that it will be discussed, likely made changes to, and voted on at our December meeting. So, anything else?
I just add that it was a discussion meeting, not a voting meeting, so that, to some of us, that would be implied, but.
Yeah, and I should have been more specific about that. I should have had a big draft, of
across the front
Yeah.
of it. I really should have, so I apologize. All right, future agenda items? Okay, our next meeting date is December 6th, 5 o'clock, right here. Remember that we will have no school on Veterans Day, November 11th, and our Thanksgiving break, as the ladies mentioned, is November 23rd through the 25th. So, all right, we are adjourned.